Is living in Columbia, South Carolina really as cheap as everyone online makes it sound? The short answer, kind of. The long answer, well, it kind of depends on a lot where you're moving from. I mean, we've had people from all over the country, some who said absolutely they save money, where others, not so much in the end of the day. That's why in this video, I'm breaking down the true cost of living in Columbia, South Carolina. Not just the average numbers you see online, but the real life costs people are actually feeling day to day. That way, you can stack it up against where you live now and see how it truly compares. We're gonna cover everything from those hidden expenses that catch people off guard, things like car taxes, utilities, and insurance. We're also going to look at the cost of food, daycare, entertainment, and healthcare, because all that stuff adds up faster than most expect. And I'm going to give you some real numbers, bills that we're actually paying to give you true ideas. But here's the kicker. The biggest shock usually comes with housing. That's right. A lot of people move here expecting their budget to stretch way further. But when they see what it really buys, it's not always the dream they pictured. And if you stick around to the end, I'll show you exactly how much house your budget really gets you in Columbia. Not just blanket averages that throw people off and getting them flying across the country excited. We're talking about true on-the-ground look at neighborhoods, the style of the homes, how much space between the houses, and more. Because for most people, that's the moment that flips their perspective. And honestly, sometimes their decision about moving here. This is probably one of the big wins for a lot of people moving here. South Carolina consistently ranks near the bottom nationally for property taxes. I mean, I've had clients from New Jersey and New York who were shocked when their entire mortgage here was cheaper than their tax bills back home. No joke, money straight back in their pockets. But on average, you're looking about 0.6% of a home's assessed value right here in the state of South Carolina. Lexington County comes in right about that number, while Richland County is slightly higher than that. Now, here's a question I get a lot. Do those higher rated schools mean higher taxes? The short answer, no. So taxes here are mostly based on, yes, the school district, the area, and whether or not there are town or city taxes built into what is called the mill rate, which in the end is just complicated government math. And this is not based on the reputation of the school itself. And there is truly no correlation between the two. Because for example, whether you live in Persimmon Grove and your kids go to Lexington High School, or you live in the Bluefield neighbor and your kids go to White Knoll High School, you'll see the same tax rate, even though online, school ratings are very differently. The difference really comes in the fact that many of those areas have a higher average home price due to the school ratings, so they generate more tax revenue. But here's where I caution people. When you're looking at tax estimates on a lot of the real estate websites, don't assume that's what you'll actually pay. Confuses a lot of people. One is because South Carolina reassesses property values every 5 years, and there's a cap on how much an assessment can increase during that cycle. That means that current owner may be paying significantly less than you would. I mean, I know my home assessment is well below my home's value, but when you buy, the property will be reassessed at the price you purchase it for. And there's one more caveat that constantly catches people off guard when it comes to property taxes. Again, you might already be wondering about it when I said rates are comparable from one area to another, especially if you've been browsing sites and seen the variances. But again, I'll circle back to that when we cover hidden costs later in this video and give you a better resource to help you with this. South Carolina usually runs well below the national average. We're currently ranked as the 8th cheapest in the entire country. And this is less than our neighboring states of North Carolina, Georgia, and even down in Florida. But especially compared to states like California, you'll feel the difference immediately. I mean, I've had buyers who said filling up their SUV here feels like they're getting a discount every single week. All right, so I'm out here grabbing gas out at Costco. And for reference, it's September 19th. I'm not sure when you're watching this, but as you can see, gas, we're looking at $2.52 a gallon. Now I use Costco because obviously, you know, the Shell on this corner and the next corner can be completely different, skew the perspective. So Costco obviously is universal, so hopefully it gives you a general perspective of what you might expect for gas prices. This next one is a surprise for a lot of people. And if you're coming from Florida, coastal Texas, or even parts of the Carolinas on the coast, you're probably bracing for sky-high premiums. I hear it all the time. People are waiting for that sticker shock. But Columbia's inland, which makes a huge difference. I mean, unless you're right in a flood zone, which is a small percentage of homes out here, most buyers are paying far less than what they budget for. I mean, some half of what they were paying back home. For reference, we live in a home built in 2019. It's a 3,600 square foot home, and we have a pool in the backyard. And we're paying right around $1,600 for the year. Pretty reasonable, right? Now, before we dive into those hidden costs, let's hit those necessities, things like groceries, healthcare, and more. As it's worth pointing out that for many relocation buyers, the savings here are very real. But there are some trade-offs you'll want to know that we will hit hit. All right, now let's shift gears and talk about basic needs. The everyday stuff you really can't avoid. After this, we'll move into the hidden costs. And of course, the big one everyone wants to know about, housing. Usually here, they run pretty close to the national average. If you're coming from California or the Northeast, you'll likely feel some relief, but don't expect bargain basement prices across the board. Plus, we got a variety of choices. We got Publix, we got Kroger, we got Aldi, Trader Joe's, Walmart, Food Lion, Lowe's Food, and even a few more specialty stores like Whole Foods and others. So you can shop around. Just keep in mind, costs have crept up nationwide, and Columbia isn't immune to this. But let's give you some examples of what you might expect. And here's some real life snapshots of some basic grocery costs that you might expect at the time of making this video. And I used Walmart for this because prices obviously can swing quite a bit between places like Publix, Food Lion, and other stores that you may shop at. But everyone knows Walmart, so it tends to be a good baseline. And I kept it simple, those everyday staples, bread, milk, eggs, and meat. I know there's 100 other things people want to ask about. And I grabbed these photos and prices on September 13th. Now, I don't know when you're watching this video, and prices obviously change because here's the interesting part. I made a similar video back at the turn of the year, and even in just 9 months, prices were noticeably higher back then, as you can see. And it's a good reminder that while Columbia remains relatively affordable with grocery costs, just like everywhere else, they're always moving. So use this as a ballpark, not a forever guarantee compared to what you pay now. And on that note, South Carolina groceries are exempt from the state's 6% sales tax. But here's the catch. Some counties and municipalities can add their own local sales tax. That means I can't give you a one-size-fits-all answer on what you'll actually pay in taxes at the register. It really depends on where you end up buying, because some areas in the Midlands don't tack on that local tax at all, while others do add a small percentage on top. So just keep that in mind when you are budgeting your monthly grocery run. Now, this is the South. We love our big front porches and our outdoors, but if you've watched any videos long enough, you know that bugs are a big deal out here. So one of the big things you gotta budget for, pest control. Now, the one that you can't skip on is gonna be your termite bond. If you're not used to termite bonds, don't hesitate to ask when you reach out, but you'll wanna keep that on the house. Now, personally, we package that with a general pest control where they spray around the house to prevent bugs. But obviously this can go much further where you can spray for mosquitoes and so much more. But to give you an idea, we're paying about $46 a quarter, and that covers that general bugs as well as that termite bond. So something to keep in mind when you're budgeting is pest control. This is one that surprises a lot of family. Childcare costs in Columbia, they can range. Now, personally, my wife works from home, so she's able to keep the kids at home, and since they have been out of preschool, we haven't had to pay. Thank you, hon, appreciate it. But I did some research and talked to some friends. Now, not all sites give you numbers, but I have seen as low as 5 days a week, ages 2 to 5 years old, 6 hours a day for $952 a month. But from what I hear, this is on the low end and can easily push over $1,000 a month. Now, personally, we were paying around $300 a month, 4-day, half days, when our kids were in preschool not that long ago. Out to that, I have seen after school for around $90 to $120 a week. But again, this can range, and more importantly, so can availability of these places. So call ahead and do some research before you make a decision. In the end though, from what I find, it's usually cheaper than some of the big metros like DC or Atlanta, but still can be a big chunk of the budget for young families if they're needing someone to watch their kids. This is another mixed bag. We got major providers. Prisma's gonna be the biggest, with the highest level trauma centers, pediatrics, and more, followed by Lexington Medical Center. And then you got MUSC, as well as a dorm VA for our veterans. And costs, from my research, are fairly average for the general Southeast. But in the end, I tell everyone, this is a tricky one, because insurance premiums and out-of-pocket costs will truly depend heavily on your personal insurance plan. But in the end of the day, know you do have some options here. This is where people either feel like they save or spend more depending on their lifestyle. So tickets for minor league baseball games, college sports, or concerts at Colonial Life Arena are usually far more affordable than those big city venues. And a lot of people lean on those local festivals and local concerts, which are much cheaper or even free. But if you're used to that constant big league entertainment, you might find yourself paying more because you're gonna have to be driving to places like Charlotte or Atlanta and getting hotels for the night for those big shows. I mean, I know we went to Atlanta to see Luke Combs and have friends that drove to Charlotte to see Morgan Wallen. Here's one people often overlook. South Carolina does have state income tax. And just like other southern states over the last few years, they've been trying to work those numbers down. And a recent amendment put us at 1.99% on taxable income up to $30,000 and 5.39% on income above that. That puts us higher than states like Florida or Texas, which have none, but lower than New York or California. So if you're moving from a non-tax state, this one can sting a little. But if you're coming from a high tax state, it may feel like a win. Now with that said, retirees, Social Security benefits are not taxed in South Carolina, while retirement income is partially taxed. Now, those are the basics. Overall, pretty manageable, and in a lot of cases, cheaper than what many of my clients are used to. But here's where it gets real. The things no one budgets for, but everyone ends up paying. Hidden costs that can make or break your budget once you're here. And I'll tell you true stories of clients that literally shifted entire gears because of these hidden costs that they weren't aware of. Let's dive into those next, and then we'll hit housing costs. And keep in mind, as many say, every state is gonna find a way to get your money somehow. All right, let's get into the stuff that doesn't always show up on videos or the cost of living in Columbia charts, but definitely hit your wallet once you're here. These are the hidden costs that most of the time catch a lot of people off guard and push them over the edge. We get kicked off with a big one. So in South Carolina, you don't just pay to register your car, you pay a yearly property tax on it. And we're not talking about sales tax, that's a different thing you pay at the dealership. And this does include your boats and RVs too. And depending on the make and model, that bill can feel steep every year. I mean, I recently had a client from Florida, and they had 4 cars, many high end. And we ran the numbers and quickly realized they were better off sticking with their high priced property insurance bill in Florida, as it wasn't gonna save them money moving here because of those car property taxes alone. They thanked me for being upfront and saving them versus just trying to sell them a home and figuring out the hard way later. Now, for reference, I just got my bill for the year here in Lexington County, and they assessed my truck at $23,830. And my yearly bill came in at $710. Now, for reference, Kelly Blue Book values my truck at $31,000 for trade-in. So you can see they depreciate pretty well. But yes, this is a yearly tax. And before people freak out, because everyone always does when I say that, from what I see, about 24 states impose an annual personal property tax on vehicles. And I know in California, our yearly DMV fees were very relative, if not more than our property taxes here. But one more thing, it's not all bad news for everybody here. One of the biggest benefits of living in South Carolina is for our disabled veterans. In South Carolina, veterans who are 100% permanently and totally disabled from a service-connected disability are exempt from property taxes on up to 2 personal vehicles. The exemption also applies to the state sales tax on these vehicles at the time of purchase. As well, a South Carolina military veteran who is totally and permanently disabled may also immediately claim a property tax exemption on real estate the veteran owns, beginning with the year in which the disability occurs. This is often another surprise for some people. You gotta keep in mind, this is a hot, humid area during the summers and can be chilling and damp winters. While we don't get snow that often, it still gets cold. So you'll be running the AC a lot in the summer and you'll be running that heat in the winter. Combine that with some older housing in certain areas and power bills can run higher than expected, especially if you're coming from a more temperate climate. But let me give you some real numbers. Now, for reference, we are on natural gas. We got a gas stove, we got a gas tankless water heater, we got a gas fireplace, and we got gas heat. For reference, we are with Dominion Energy. There are a few providers out throughout the area. And I got our bill here that was for July. And to give you an idea, for gas and electric, we spent $250. Now they say the average home of our size, again, 3,600 square feet, comes in around $320 a month. And they say more efficient homes, obviously those newer homes or been updated, they say the average is around $282. So we're kind of on the low side of that. Now, for bigger picture, our lowest over the year was in early spring when you're not really running the heat and AC as much. And it was $117. And for reference, 87 of that was electric and 37 was gas. Our highest was in the winter at $304, 106 electric and $197 for gas. But to give you an idea, our average bill from Dominion was right about $200 a month. Now let's roll into water and sewer. So we're personally with Joint Municipal. Again, there's different municipalities throughout the area. Our lowest bill was $87. It's gonna be during the winter months when you're not running the sprinklers as often. Now our highest came in at $179. Of course, during those summer months when you're running the sprinklers more. But the average came in at $134 throughout the year. And again, that's for both water and sewer. Yes, we do pay both here. Now trash. In certain cities and towns, trash will be included in your taxes. Over in Richland County, outside city limits, you'll be billed for trash through the county. And what I've seen on average is about $385. Now in Lexington County, there are some towns and cities where trash is included, but any of the unincorporated areas, trash is going to be separate service that you can opt into. And each area will be different. But to give you an idea, we are an unincorporated part of Lexington County, and we pay about $90 a quarter for trash and recycle. Car insurance is another one that catches people by surprise because it's often higher than more people expect. Again, us from California, we save money here. But either way, this is in part to the fact that, yes, South Carolina drivers are not that great, as many have pointed out. They rank high in traffic accidents and uninsured drivers, which drives up premiums. So if you're coming from a low-cost state, don't be surprised if your monthly bill jumps. Again, for reference, I'm paying about $739 every 6 months. Now, my wife's SUV is older than my car and puts less miles per year than I do. She's about $471 every 6 months. So about $2,400 a year for 2 cars. Now, here's another big South Carolina curveball that catches a lot of people off guard. South Carolina has a big difference between primary and secondary residence tax rates. Your primary home gets a significantly discounted rate. You'll often hear people talk about a 4% rate and a 6% rate, but it's not a true 2% difference. Remember mill rates, and there are massive discounts associated with legal residence. But if you buy a second home, investment property, or even a lake house you don't claim as your main residence, the tax rate can be 4 to 5 times as much as what we talked about earlier. No joke, real numbers. In Lexington County School District 1, on a $350,000 house, you're looking at that primary tax rate of $2,090 a year. That jumps to $10,413 a year on a secondary residence. I mean, I've had plenty of buyers eyeing a Lake Murray getaway or wanting to start investing in the area, only to pump the brakes when they realized the tax bill that was going to come with it. The short answer in the end of the day, to prevent all the confusion I talked about earlier with taxes, use the local county tax estimator. Whatever county you're considering, Lexington County, Richland County, they all have tax estimators, and it's the only sure way to verify rates. This is the same for those car taxes too, to figure out what you should expect to pay. And since we're on topic, because verbiage is different from state to state, what we're talking about is the difference between primary residence and secondary residence. Homestead exemption. For us, a homestead exemption is those that are 65, disabled, or blind, and exempts the first $50,000 of a property's fair market value. So essentially, to make it easy, if you have a $350,000 house, you'll be assessed at $300,000 instead. So while Columbia is affordable in a lot of ways, these are the things that can sneak up and make your budget feel tighter than you planned. And here's the thing, while those hidden costs can sting, they're still not the biggest shock for most people moving here. The real curveball usually comes when you start looking at homes. I get it, sounds confusing, right? Because everyone sees Columbia listed online as affordable. And yes, compared to a lot of bigger metros, it definitely is. But once you're on the ground, you'll see pretty quickly that what your budget buys here might not be what you imagined. So let's talk about the big one, the housing costs. What your money actually gets you in Columbia, and why this is often a make or break factor for relocation buyers. All right, so after talking to over 1,000 people considering a move to the area and helping over 100 actually make the move, let's pull back the curtain and show you what these price points really buy you here. Because the reality is, a lot of people see pretty southern homes online for significantly less than what they get back home. They get excited, fly across the country, and then they're taken back. This doesn't look like the pictures. I can't stand this area or neighborhood. So let's prevent that disappointment, because there's no one size fits all answer. It's why I pause when people reach out and say, look, I just need a 4-bed, 2-bath house in a nice neighborhood. There's more to it than that. Instead, this is the way I walk my clients through Columbia housing when they fly in for a weekend of house hunting. We don't just start with numbers and houses. We start with lifestyle priorities. Do you want something brand new or a resale? Do you want to be near the lake, the city, or do you care more about land and privacy? Are you drawn to older established neighborhoods, close to the city, or newer master plan suburbs? Each one comes with very different price tag and very different set of trade-offs. So let's break it down the way I would in person, one category at a time. True boots on the ground looks. Now, most important, before we start talking numbers, let's map out the key areas around Columbia we're going to talk about. because each pocket has its own personality, different prices, different curveballs, and a few trade-offs that you need to know about. And this is just gonna be the Reader's Digest version, as later on, I'll point you to a playlist that breaks this down even further. But this is the critical step most people glaze over. So let's start with Lexington. It's one of the fastest growing suburbs, top-rated schools, strong shopping quarters, quaint downtown, quick access to Lake Murray. Now prices reflect that because of that demand. Trade-offs, you have traffic along Highway 378, Sunset Boulevard, and around the shopping hubs can feel more like a small city than a sleepy suburb. Red Bank, it's a fast-growing corridor southeast of Lexington that's adding retail, grocery anchors, and new construction at rapid pace. Prices are more budget-friendly than core Lexington, but the trade-off, more commercial feel and heavier traffic on stretches like Platte Springs and South Lake Drive, as well as schools not quite as highly ranked as those close to Lake Murray. Irmo and Chapin, they both hug Lake Murray but offer different vibes. Irmo mixes older established neighborhoods with affordable options and a classic suburban feel, which is heavy on chain shopping. It's great for budgets, but less small town charm and more of that 80s, 90s suburban look. Chapin leans towards a quaint small town feel and newer construction around the water. The flip side, 2-lane roads and a longer drive to major shopping in downtown Columbia mean more time in the car. Northeast Columbia, big master plan communities, golf courses, and plenty of new construction. Perfect if you want newer homes, neighborhood amenities, and quick interstate access to Fort Jackson, Columbia, or more. But it's also one of the most densely populated parts of the Midland and lacks that small town feel like Lexington or Chapin have. Blythewood, it's a blend of larger homes, bigger lots, and a semi-rural vibe while still offering good schools and new construction. The trade-off is price. Demand has already driven values up, and commuting to downtown can stretch, especially during rush hour. Now the rural outskirts, talking Elgin, Gaston, Hopkins, and Gilbert. This is where you'll find the lowest price per square foot. Perfect if you want space, privacy, or even a little bit of farmland nearby. The catch? Fewer amenities and far less polish. Think Food Lion and IGA, no Publix. Think pizza shops and Mexican joints, no nice sit downs. And you'll likely be driving 30 to 40 minutes or more for anything more than a Dollar General or a budget grocery store in some of these areas. Keep in mind, Columbia is much smaller than most big metros. I get it. I grew up outside the big city where an hour drive away still kept you in the middle of a dense suburb. Here, an hour in any direction from downtown Columbia, and you'll feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. Knowing these trade-offs first makes the price breakdowns ahead way easier to digest and better to understand, because you'll see that every dollar in the Midlands buys a different lifestyle depending on which side of the town you pick. And there's not one right or wrong answer. It's which one fits you best. All right, now that you know the map, let's break down what homes actually cost in each of these spots. We're getting started with new construction. Then we're gonna move to resales, those on land, lakefront living, and those historic in-town neighborhoods. And we're getting kicked off with new construction because, just being honest, about half my clients end up buying new. I mean, the appeal is obvious, right? Warranties, modern layouts, energy efficiency, move-in ready option. But here's the key. Prices vary a lot depending on whether you're in Lexington, Chapin, Blythewood, Northeast Columbia, or the more rural pockets. So I'll give you some on-the-ground examples of different price points and areas. And here's how it really breaks down. And we're gonna get started with the Lexington and River Bluff area. Carriage Estates. This neighborhood comes in between the high 300s and the 500s. This neighborhood does have a community pool. Hendricks Farm. This neighborhood comes in between the high 300s and the 500s. This neighborhood has a community pool. Saluda River Club. Homes start in the 400s for their patio style homes, up to the 900s for single family. This neighborhood is one of the most sought after in the area, with resort style amenities and more. Next, let's head over to the Red Bank and South Lexington area. The Bluefield neighborhood. Homes from the 200s to the 300s. This neighborhood does have a community pool. The Longview neighborhood. Homes from the 300s to the 400s. This neighborhood has a community pool. Next, let's head over to Chapin. Chapin Place. Homes from the 300s to the 500s. And in one of the future phases, they will build a pool. Pebble Branch. From the 300s to the 500s. And they will have a pool in the future. Now let's head over to Northeast Columbia. Ellington. Homes in here from the 200s to the 300s, and they do have a community pool. Pecan Orchard at Wood Creek Farms. Homes in here are from the 400s to the 800s. Lake Carolina, the Harborside neighborhood. Homes in the 800s. Next, we head over to Blythewood, the Grand Arbor neighborhood, starting with their Syntex line from the 200s to the 300s, as well as their Pulte line from the 300s to the 500s. This neighborhood has a community pool. Abney Hill Estates, homes starting in the 400s, and they do have a community pool. Now we head over to the more rural options, talking Gilbert, Gaston, Hopkins, and Lugoff. The Winston Point neighborhood over in Gilbert, homes from the 200s to the 300s. They do have a community pool. Heron Point over in Gaston, homes from the 200s to the 300s. Hunter's Branch in Hopkins, homes from the 200s to the 300s. The Harvest Ridge neighborhood in Elgin, homes from the high 200s to the mid 300s. Keep in mind, you're gonna get more land, but trade off in that polish and amenities that we talked about earlier. Now let's dive into some new Lake Murray neighborhoods. Palmetto Shores, this is gonna be over in Chapin with homes from the 500s to the 600s. Whitewater Landing, this neighborhood's gonna be over in Chapin with homes from the 500s to the 800s. Coming soon over in Irmo, you have Waterside at Pine Island. Prices are projected to be $500,000 and up on this gated lake neighborhood. And before we move on, let's tackle one of the biggest questions I get when we talk new construction. Where's the new construction on land? So the reality is, if you want brand new homes on acreage, you're usually looking in those more rural areas. Some, again, being about 40 minutes or more from any downtown or major shopping. Out there, new builds are gonna be on septic, thus requiring those larger lots. And you can sometimes find them starting in the 300s. They're more affordable, but again, that trade-off is distance. You'll be driving for groceries, schools, and even work if you have to be in town. Now, closer to town, it's a different story. If you want new construction paired with land, but still within reach of Columbia in places like Lexington, Irmo, or more, you're typically looking at $600,000 and up, often pushing well over $1 million though. And these lot sizes range from about 3/4 an acre to 2+ acres. But those builds usually come with higher end finishes and those custom touches. Bottom line, new construction on land does exist, but it's either budget friendly with long commutes or closer in with that luxury price tag. There's not much consistency in the in-between, outside of some random fill-in lots. And we'll talk more about homes on land later in a bit. But the takeaway, yes, new construction often gives you modern finishes and community amenities, but prices shift dramatically depending on whether you're after proximity to shopping, more land, or that true lake living. And remember, while yes, you can find homes around that $200,000 to $300,000 mark, you're gonna find smaller lots, limited upgrades, or in those more rural areas. That is why new builds usually cost more than people expect here, especially if they want lake access, larger lots, or those big amenities. I tell people all the time, if you're looking at homes online and you just feel like you can't find what you like, remove that top end budget and see if it just costs more than you were expecting. And keep this in mind as we move into the numbers in the next sections. When you hear the median price for an area, that's the middle of the market. It's not the ceiling, and it's definitely not the ideal dream home everyone pictures on Zillow. So if you're hoping for something a little newer, larger, more land, or in a prime neighborhood, you'll need to budget above that median price point we talk about. Starting with this perspective will make the next breakdowns way more useful because you'll already know that the prices I'm sharing are a starting point, not always the finish line. Speaking of land, let's talk about pricing for homes on acreage, because this is one of the biggest questions I get right after new construction. Where's those homes with a little more space? Now the price range, honestly, as you can imagine, it's all over the map. Some buyers coming in thinking land automatically means luxury, while others think they'll score a deal just because they're further out. The truth kind of sits somewhere in between. So let me break down what you can actually expect in a few different areas, from closer in suburbs like Lexington and Blythewood to more rural spots like Elgin. And for reference, I pulled a minimum of 3-bed house on at least a half an acre up to 5 acres. As anything more, the average is significantly jumped. So when people ask about homes on land around Lake Murray, from Lexington to Irmo to Chapin, the price range again is wide. Now over the last year, sales stretch from one end of the spectrum to the other. Starting on the lower end, you had a 1994 home built over in Red Bank. It was 1,090 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, and it was sitting on 1.5 acres. Now that sold for $175,000. On the other end, you had a 2017 built property in Lexington, over 3,800 square feet with a 1,000 square foot guest house on 1.35 acres. That closed for well over $1 million. But here's where the reality sets in, that median sales price. And it came in at $465,000. And that typically got you a 2,631 square foot home. That means yes, you can still find acreage homes under $500,000. But if you want newer construction or larger square footage closer to town, you're usually looking at a much higher price point. So if Lake Murray life with space to spread out is your dream, just know the range runs from affordable but older fixer-uppers to high-end estates and all the bells and whistles. Now, let's talk about Blythewood, one of the most asked about spots for land and space. The range here, again, is just as wide. On the low end, you had a 1984 built 896 square foot home, 3 beds, 1 bath, sitting on an acre, and it sold for around $100,000. On the opposite end, a 2008 built estate with 5 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, and over 6,100 square feet on nearly 5 acres, and that sold for $915,000. But here's a number most people want to know. That median sale in Blythewood on land came in at $508,500, and that typically bought you around 3,100 square feet. Bigger on average than what we just saw around Lake Murray. So the takeaway, in Blythewood, you can get more house for the money compared to lake areas, but you give up direct water access and proximity to more amenities. Now, Elgin and Lugoff is another area people ask about when they want land, being more rural. And the price spread here is pretty eye-opening and is another reason you'll see why people pick the area. On the low end, you had a 2003 built 1,456 square foot home, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths on 2.5 acres. And that sold for just under $100,000. Now on the higher end, 2015 built home, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, about 1,850 square feet on 5 acres, and that sold for $650,000. But the median is what really sets the expectations and gets people excited. Your median came in at $287,500, and that median size home came in right around 1,959 square feet. Again, the takeaway, Elgin is one of the more affordable ways to get acreage while still being just over 30 minutes to Columbia and about 10 to 20 minutes to the Northeast Corridor shopping. It's a great option if you want land without blowing past that $500,000 mark, but you'll sacrifice the size, finishes, and again, that suburban polish you'd get in Blythewood or Lexington. Each option has its own cost curve, and at the end of the day, knowing which lifestyle you want matters more than chasing a pretty Zillow listing that looks like a Pinterest board. Because the listing might sell you on the 4 walls and the nice land, but it's the area around it that truly determines whether or not it fits your lifestyles. Buyers often hope and expect that Texas-style land bargains here, but land close in still carries a premium. When it comes to Lake Murray, the price you'll pay depends a lot on what kind of access you want. Because there's a big difference between a neighborhood boat ramp, a deeded slip, and true lakefront living. So let's get started with neighborhoods with boat ramps in the Lexington, Irmo, and Chapin area. So in these communities, you get neighborhood water access without that full lakefront price tag. And over the last year, sales range from a 2000 built 3-bed, 2-bath home, 1,264 square feet, and it sold for $225,000. All the way up to a 2009 built 4,470 square feet home with 4 beds, 4.5 baths that sold for just over $1.2 million. Now the median here was $535,000, and the median home size was 2,939 square feet. Now let's talk homes with boat slips. If you want a deeded slip, the range kind of tightens up. Homes sold from the mid 400s up to the mid 900s, with the median sitting right at $500,000. Yes, it was actually less than those with just boat ramps in the neighborhoods. But keep in mind, the lot sizes on average were less than 0.2 acres. But still, for many buyers, this is a sweet spot. Direct lake access without paying full lakefront premiums. Now let's talk on the lake homes. And first we're gonna get kicked off on that Lexington, Irmo, and Chapin side. And if you want true lakefront living, here's the reality. On the low end, out in Leesville, we saw a 1975 home. It was 3 beds, 2 baths, plus a 1-bed efficiency apartment, totaling 2,189 square feet. And that sold for $330,000. Again, keep in mind that was in the more rural areas. On the high end though, a 2018 built 9,250 square foot, 5-bed, 4-bath luxury estate sold for $8.25 million. But that median came in at $1,067,000. And the median size home was 3,021 square feet. So yes, you can still find older, smaller lakefront homes in the 300s to 500s a bit further out. But most move-in ready homes closer to town on Lake Murray sit closer to or above that $1 million mark. Now let's talk about the rural counties, Saluda and Newberry. So if you push even further out to Saludo and Newberry side of the lake, you'll often find more house and land for less money. I mean, here sales range from a 1973 built 1,882 square foot home that sold for $280,000 up to a 2014 built 3,870 square feet for $1,325,000. But the median was only $680,000 compared to the Lexington, Chapin, and Irmo side. And that median size home was typically 2,241 square feet. Again, the takeaway, Lake Murray Living runs the full spectrum, from 200,000 starter homes with community ramps to well over $1 million move-in ready waterfront estates, to rural county deals where you can trade a longer commute and less convenience for more land and at lower prices. It all comes down to which version of lake life matches your budget and your lifestyle. Let's wrap up with established neighborhoods and then we'll bring this thing back home. And we're gonna shift gears and talk about the in-town classics, and then I'll bring you to a bonus one. But let's get started with neighborhoods like Shandon, Forest Acres, Heathwood, and Rosewood. These areas aren't about big master plan communities or sprawling acreage. What makes them stand out is that historic charm, those tree-lined streets, and proximity to downtown Columbia. Now on the low end, we saw a 1959 built 3-bed, 2-bath home over in Rosewood. Came in about 1,468 square feet, and it sold for $172,000. Now on the other end, a 1961 built 5-bed, 4-bath house in Heathwood, and that home closed for $2.4 million. But the median tells the story most people need to hear. It came in at $424,000, and that median size home was around 1,938 square feet. That means you're often paying more for location, character, and prestige than the square footage. Now the takeaway, in-town neighborhoods aren't about sprawling land or resort-style amenities. They're about lifestyle, being minutes from Divine Street restaurants, shopping in Forest Acres, and having that old Columbia feel that master plan suburbs can't replicate. You still get walkability and charm. So for buyers who value history and convenience as a city over space, these neighborhoods are some of the most sought after pockets in the Midlands. These aren't cheap fixer-uppers. They're premium addresses because of location and character. And again, as a quick bonus, let's talk about Irmo and its established neighborhoods, because it's another spot where buyers often seek out older established neighborhoods with tree-lined streets. The vibe here is similar to some of those Columbia in-town areas, but the price point tends to be more budget-friendly. Now, when we look at sales from the last year, again, we've already talked about new construction, so I'm gonna talk about those that are more older established. And we were talking about livable homes, because trust me, there's plenty of handyman specials out in these areas. And they range from a 1987 built 3-bed, 2-bath home that came in at 1,362 square feet, and it sold for $160,000, up to a 1990 built 4,670 square foot home, 4 bedrooms, 3 full baths, 2 half baths on 4 acres that sold for $1.05 million. But the median tells a real story over here, $250,000, and the median size home was 1,871 square feet. Now the takeaway, Irmo again gives you that established tree-lined neighborhood feel at a fraction of the price compared to places like Heathwood or Forest Acres. You may not get the same level of historic prestige and walkability, but for buyers who want charm, space, and affordability all in one, Irmo continues to be one of the Midlands' most practical hidden gems. So here's the bottom line. Columbia's housing market isn't one size fits all. You got everything from new construction neighborhoods with shiny amenities to established in-town homes with historic charm to lakefront estates that sell for millions, and even rural acreage where space is the biggest luxury. The catch, every option comes with trade-offs, whether it's commute times, budget, or lifestyle. That's why the most important thing you can do before falling in love with a Zillow listing is to figure out which version of Columbia actually fits you. And that's what my team and I do every single day. We don't just unlock doors and cash commission checks. We help people cut through the noise, set real expectations, and find a neighborhood that actually feels like home. So if you're planning to move here or just starting to think about it, reach out. All of our info is below. And if you're still exploring, again, I've built this full playlist right here where we dive deeper into Columbia's neighborhoods, the pros and cons of each, and even the curveballs most people don't see coming. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about buying a home and affordability. It's about building the life you actually want. And Columbia has more options than most people even realize.